I raised my wife's children as my own, but when they disrespected me, I stopped pro-VY-ding. Am I the one I've always believed in? A few fundamental principles: working hard for what you have, accepting responsibility for your actions, and remaining loyal to those you care about. I also learned the hard way that low VYing the wrong people can lead to serious problems. This entire story is about how my VYUs were put to the test and how everything I thought I understood about family came crumbling down. To be honest, this isn't a happy story. It's about being taken advantage of, being exploited, and finally recognizing when enough. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I'm going to tell you exactly how it happened because I believe it's vital to be honest about these. We often hear of happy ending, but sometimes the ending is simply an ending. Sometimes that's fine. It is actually necessary. I'm not trying to be a saint here. I made mistakes. I was perhaps very trusting and inclined to believe in the best in others. I ignored certain red signs and paid the consequences. However, I also learned a lot. So, how did it all begin? It began with a woman named Karina. She was widowed. Her husband, a military officer, had died. She had 2 young children, a boy named Tristan, who was about 4 years old and full of energy, and a baby girl named Opal, who was just learning to walk. I met them through a mutual friend. I could tell immediately that Karina was struggling. She wasn't just sad, though she certainly was. It was more than that. She was totally fatigued, sibly weary. You could see it in the way she held herself, the dark circles under her eyes, and the way she appeared to be running on fumes. It wasn't just I'm tired tiredness. It was a deep, bone-weary exhaustion caused by carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. I didn't intervene because I felt obligated or anything. It was not some sort of knight in shining armor complex. It was only that I actually saw her. I observed her struggle and wanted to help. I wanted to make things a little simpler for her and the children. I had a genuine desire to VY to some stability and support in their lives. I began by helping out in small ways, such as offering to keep the kids so she could take a nap or running errands. However, it quickly became more. I found myself yearning to be a father figure for those children. Their father had passed away, and I felt confident that I could fill in for him, not to replace him, of course, but to VY to them with the love and support that every child needs. I suppose you could say I was contrasting my own values, hard labor, responsibility, and loyalty with the circumstances they were in. I wanted to give them what their father couldn't, not because I had to, but because I really wanted to. It felt right. It felt like the beginning of something positive, something real, and for a long time it was okay. I poured myself into it. I worked long hours not only to pay the bills, but also to ensure that those children had everything they required: a decent school, great clothes, a pleasant home, lots of food on the table, all of it. I prioritized their needs before my own. I wasn't simply attempting to meet their basic needs. I also wanted to alleviate any sense of loss they may have had because their father was not present. I wanted to fill the vacuum and make them feel safe and cherished. It wasn't all about the material goods, however. I was also there for them emotionally. I attended every single school event, soccer game, and play. I cheered the loudest. I was their biggest fan. I planned birthday parties, family vacations, and did all of the dad things. They responded. They loved me back. They addressed me as dad rather than, and you know what? I believed it. I actually did. I felt like I was the luckiest man alive. I believed I had established a genuine, low VYing family. I was so caught up in the idea, in the desire for it to be true, that I failed to notice the cracks that were beginning to. I was so intent on creating the perfect photo that I ignored the warning indicator. Looking back, I realized that I was building on a foundation that was not as firm as I had assumed, but at the moment, I was fully committed. I invested my heart and soul. I was determined to make this work and be the greatest father figure I could be. I put everything I had into it, and for a while it appeared to be paying off. We had rituals, conventions, and inside jokes. We were a family. I felt confident that emotion was what kept me going. The initial signals of problems were minor, almost insignificant. A few comments from the youngsters, some back talk, and a roll of the eyes here and there. Nothing significant, nothing unusual for children growing up. I brushed it off. I told myself that was just standard teenage VY, or a phase they were passing through. I didn't want to perceive it as more than that. I recall Tristan, he must have been around 13 or 14, making a nasty remark about how I wasn't cool because I wouldn't let him stay out late. Opal, who was a few years younger, responded with a similarly nasty remark. It stung a little, but I laughed it off. I told myself they were only testing boundaries and pushing limits, as all teens do. As the children grew older, the disdain became more obvious. By the age of 17, Tristan had become a full-fledged teenager. He began ignoring curfews, dismissing any advice I offered, and generally acting as if he was entitled to do whatever he wanted. It was typical teenage rebellion, but it felt different, sharper somehow. There was a meanness that I couldn't ignore. Opal, who was around 14 at the time, began copying her brother's conduct. She would roll her eyes at me, ignore my orders, and dismiss any worries I expressed. They established a united front, demonstrating that they did not respect my authority, or me for that matter. It felt like they were ganging up on me, seeing how far they could push me. Karina's reply, or lack thereof, exacerbated the situation. She declined to intervene. She would not back me up. She'd just sit there, generally looking at her phone, pretending not to notice what was going on. Sometimes, she would even gently undermine me. Maybe she'd appear to be distracted by her phone, or sigh as if I was being unreasonable. It wasn't simply passive. She seemed to actively encourage their actions. She'd make excuses for them. Oh, they're just tired. They're going through a phase, or we need to keep the peace. There was always something. However, it was actually a pattern of supporting their disdain. She was allowing them to get away with it, undermining my authority, and making me feel more lonely. I started to feel like I was the only one who cared about setting boundaries and teaching them what was right and wrong. I began to mistrust Karina's motives. Was she truly this oblivious, or was she purposely undermining me? I received my first true wake-up call about this time, but I still didn't completely understand what was going on. The true breaking point, when everything began to fall apart, occurred one night. Tristan arrived home much beyond his curfew. I'm talking hours later, and he hadn't called, texted, or anything. I was scared sick, of course, but when he eventually walked in, he acted as if it was nothing. I asked him calmly where he had been, just a simple question to ensure accountability. He did not even look at me. He simply stated, "Relax, I'm not a kid." That was it. There was no apology or explanation, just a flippant brush off, and then he shouted, "You're not my real dad. Stop acting like you own me." All those years of love, care, and support were flung back in my face. It felt like a punch in the belly. Opal, who was standing there, chipped in, "Yeah, you're just some guy Mom married," as if all the years we'd spent together and the experiences we'd shared were meaningless. Something inside me has just broken. It wasn't anger, not yet, but rather a deep sense of disillusionment. And the worst part? Karina did not say anything. She just stood there silently. Her silence represented the ultimate betrayal. It proved all I had suspected, that I was nothing more than a convenience to them, a provider, someone to handle the things their true father couldn't. It was the defining moment when I learned that the family I believed I had created would fix. It was not long after the first episode that it occurred again. This time it was Opal. She had made a mess in the kitchen, so I asked her to clean it up. Simple enough, right? Basic responsibilities, but instead, she simply looked at me and said, "Why don't you do it? It's your house, isn't it?" That stung. It wasn't just the contempt. It was how she said it, as if I were a servant whose sole function was to clean up after them. It accentuated my outsider status, reducing me to little more than a provider. It was an intentional attempt to make me feel insignificant. And then, as if on cue, Tristan added the identical line, "You're not even our real dad." It was as if they were tag-teaming me, reaffirming their rejection and ensuring I understood my place, or lack thereof, in their lives. But this time, Karina's reply sealed the deal. She didn't yell or become irritated. She just looked at me nonchalantly, not glancing up from her phone, and remarked, "They have a point, Gareth. Maybe you should back off." That was all. That was the moment I realized it was finished. It was no longer just the children's disdain. Karina had explicitly agreed with. She was siding with them against me, the guy who had spent years caring for them. It wasn't a moment of rage or even pain. Not really. It was a moment of clarity. I eventually realized I was finished. There was no going back. This was not a family. It was a fake, and I was finally ready to leave. It was a gentle epiphany, a peaceful acceptance of the fact I was no longer striving to hang on to something that was not genuine. I was ready to let go, so I did something I never imagined I would do. I paused. I stopped giving, caring, and trying. It wasn't an impulsive decision. It was a calculated, thoughtful one. I just withdrew. I stopped providing for them. No more rides, allowances, protection, guidance, or worry. I let them face the repercussions of their BHVY. It was a total 180 from the way I had been for years. I was always there for them, no matter what. Now I was gone. I'm not going to lie. It stung. It contradicted every instinct I had. I had committed so much of myself in this family, and it was really terrible to simply walk away, but I knew it was important. I needed to defend myself. I knew it would not be easy. I knew they would react and try to push back, but I was prepared for it. I'd hit my limit. I gave them everything I had, and they threw it back at me. I was finished being the doormat. At first, they laughed. They insulted me, made caustic remarks, and smirked whenever I passed by. They believed they had won. They assumed they didn't need me. They were relying on Karina to deliver all I was pro-VY did. They were wrong. They make these tiny jabs, copying my directions and mocking the way I try to set boundaries. They'd exclaim, "Oh, are we breaking the rules?" while rolling their eyes and smirking at each other. It was as if they were attempting to provoke me, to elicit a reaction from me. Oh, Karina made sure to pick up my slack. She paid for their small shopping trips and ensured that their weekends were still full with fast food and excessive spending. She kept them comfortable, smug, and con-VY and said them they didn't need me, but I knew it would not last. I knew Karina had few resources. She did not have the same salary as I did. She couldn't keep up that kind of spending indefinitely, so I stayed quiet. I let them have fun. I let them think they could get away with it. I knew the reality check was coming. I didn't participate. I did not argue. I did not react. I simply observed calmly, waiting for the INEVY table. It was a strange kind of patience, formed by the con-VY tie-in, that I was correct. I knew their confidence was based on a flimsy foundation that would soon disintegrate. I simply had to wait it out. It was a waiting game. Then, gradually but certainly, things began to alter. Shopping outings became less regular. Fast food trips became fewer and farther between. New garments have ceased emerging. Small changes at first, but VY Cybele. Then more problems began to surface. School expenses became an issue. Tristan got into some difficulty at school, and Karina wasn't sure how to handle it. Opal smashed her phone and had no money to repair it. I remember the first time Tristan missed his school transportation. He'd always taken it for granted, rarely trying to express gratitude. Now he was alone. He had to run for bus, and from what I've heard, he barely made it, huffing and puffing, absolutely out of breath. It's a minor detail, but it was symbolic. It was the first noticeable break in their comfy world, and I'll confess it, I felt a sense of satisfaction, not joy precisely, but a quiet vindication. I knew what it was like to strive and work for everything you had. I recall when I was younger and had to work hard to make ends. They, on the other hand, have always received everything naturally. I said nothing. I just watched. I could see Opal's frustration when she learned her broken phone would not be magically replaced. I overheard her complain to Karina, as well as Karina's increasingly feeble justifications. She was running out of money and realized she couldn't offer everything I had. That following day, Opal had a major breakdown, complaining about how unfair it was that she couldn't have her phone repaired. Karina finally stated, just above a whisper, that she didn't have the money right now. It was a minor admission, but a crucial one. It was the first time she had openly acknowledged her limited resources. It was the beginning of the end for their denial. The truth of their situation began to seep in. They were beginning to realize that their PRIVY-legged existence was dependent on me, the person they had so easily discarded and despised. The free ride was ended, and they were beginning to feel the bumps in the road. It was a brutal but necessary awakening. My absence was making itself felt. Not long after the phone incident, Karina confronted me, of course. She was upset. She accused me of being childish and disregarding my obligations. That word, responsibilities, stayed with me. It indicated how she saw me, not as a partner, not as a father figure, but as someone with commitments to meet, a pro-VY-der, a walking ATM. She kept blaming me for everything that was going wrong. She felt I was abandoning them, being selfish, and not acting like a man. She tried to make me feel guilty, as if I were the terrible guy. It was all a projection, of course. She was projecting her own failings onto me. I let her rant. I let her say everything, and when she paused for breath, I asked her a simple question. I questioned her why she had never defended me, and why she had always supported the children, even when they were disrespectful. I questioned her why she had let them treat me the way they did, and that is when it happened. That's when the truth eventually emerged. She sneered and, sneered and said, "Because I agree with them, Gareth. You were never really their father." It felt like a slap in the face, but it also confirmed everything I had assumed, but it did not end there. She went further. She actually stated that she had warned the kids not to let me make. "I told them not to let you control them," she claimed. "I raised them alone before you, and I can do it again." That was the real kicker. It was not simply passive VY. It was deliberate long-term undermining. She had intentionally promoted their disdain and poisoned their minds again. Tristan and Opal were standing in the corridor, arms crossed, with smug expressions on their faces. It seemed like they were enjoying the show. At that point I thought, this is it. This is who they really are, not the sweet, innocent children I tried to love and care for, but spoiled, entitled brats enabled by their manipulative mother. Despite the hurt and betrayal, I felt relieved. It was over. The charade was over. I had an answer. There was no ambiguity and no space for doubt. I knew without a doubt that I had made the right decision by walking away. The reality was unpleasant, but also liberating. I was finally free, but things worsened before they improved. Karina's rage, combined with their own sense of entitlement, drove the kids to act out even more. It began with tiny things. My personal possessions would disappear. Then some crucial work files vanished from my computer. I began to suspect they were teasing me, but I had no proof. The situation then escalated. One morning I discovered my car had been keyed, a long, deep mark along the side. That's when I realized I needed to do something. I discreetly installed security cameras inside and outside the home. I didn't tell anyone, including Karina. I only wanted to gather proof. I succeeded. A few days later, I caught Tristan and Opal on video in my closet. They were laughing, ripping up my garments, and destroying them with scissors. It was purposeful vandalism. I did not challenge them. I did not yell or scream. I just stayed quiet. I documented everything. I've saved the video clip. I took pictures of the damage. I gathered all of the menacing texts they'd sent me, denke of their growing anger. I was playing along, letting them believe they were winning, while secretly planning my departure. I realized I had to defend myself, not just emotionally, but legally. I knew things were going to get bad, so I wanted to be prepared. I was preparing my case, accumulating the ammunition I'd need to fight back if necessary. It was a sad and pathetic scenario, but I was resolved to handle it with as much respect and calm as I could. I was not going to come down to their level. I was going to be smart, strategic, and quiet. The next step was to see a lawyer. I described the problem and showed him all of the proof I had obtained. He listened quietly, nodding occasionally. When I finished, he told me I had a solid case. We discussed divorce, and he even offered a restraining order due to the children's growing animosity. I also filed a police report regarding the property damage. It felt strange to report my stepchildren to the police, but I knew it was necessary. I needed to keep an official record of their actions to protect myself from any accusations or legal challenge. It was another step in the process of breaking relationships and freeing myself from this toxic environment. Then, one afternoon, while Karina and the children were gone, I packed a bag. I didn't take much, just the necessities, the things that were most important to me. I left everything else behind, including the furniture, appliances, and material possessions I had accumulated over the years. They weren't important. What was crucial was my freedom and peace of mind. I left an envelope on the kitchen countertop. The divorce papers were inside, along with copies of all supporting documentation, such as the police report, images of the damage, and screenshots of the threatening text. It was a formal act of separation. There was no going back. I went out of the house and did not look back. I got into my car, the one with the long scrape on the side, and drove away. I didn't have a plan really. I just knew I needed to get out of the toxic environment I was VYing in. The last phase was financial. I stopped all joint accounts and denied Karina access to my assets. It was a harsh move, I admit, but it was necessary. I had to limit her capacity to continue enabling the children's entitled VY. I needed to make it apparent that the gravy train had halted. It was the final cut of ties, the ultimate act of departure. It was over. Karina reacted as one could have imagined. She contacted me several times, VYing furious voicemails accusing me of being a coward, abandoning them, and being a bad person. She claimed she could live without me, that she didn't want my money, and that she would be better off without me. It was just bluster, of course. She was in denial and refused to acknowledge the reality of the situation. I did not return her calls. I did not react to her text. I just blocked her number. I declined to engage in additional dispute. I had spoken my piece, I'd taken my stand, and I was finished. I needed to focus on my own well-being and create a new life for myself. Then the children began messaging. At first they sent the same careless, arrogant messages they had always sent, but the tone gradually shifted. They began to sound apprehensive and even sorry. They apologized for their actions, admitting that things were challenging and that they were struggling without my help. Finally, I got a message from Opal, the younger one. It was only 3 words. I miss you. It was a big change, but it was too late. The damage was done. The trust was broken. I couldn't return even if I wanted to. I stayed mute. I did not respond. I recognized their regret, but I remained solid in my decision. I'd learned a harsh lesson and was determined not to make the same mistakes again. I gave them everything I had, and they threw it back at me. I was finished. My silence was my response. It was my way of saying, you made your choice, and now you have to live with the consequence. So that is my story. It's not pretty, but it's genuine, and it taught me some essential things. The most important rule is to never allow others to take you for granted. Never beg for respect. Never waste your energy on indie VY duels who do not appreciate you. And if you feel used or insulted, move away. Do not hesitate. Do not look back. It's a difficult lesson to learn, and even more difficult to apply, but it's necessary for your own well-being and self-respect. You deserve to be treated with kindness, respect, and love. And if you don't get it, you have the right or obligation to walk away. Some indie VY duels only recognize your worth after and by then it's too late. It's a terrible truth, but it is nonetheless a truth. Do not wait for them to recognize your worth. Know your worth and act appropriately. It is not about selfishness. It is about self-awareness. It is about protecting your heart, mind, and soul. Thank you for reading. I hope my story can help someone out there who is going through something similar. Remember that you're not alone and you deserve to be happy. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. Choose yourself. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening.